Book 1, Canto 10. The Legend of the Knight of Red Cross. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Morgan Scorpion. The Faerie Queene by Edmund Spenser. Book 1. The Legend of the Knight of Red Cross. Canto 10. Her faithful knight fair Una brings to a house of holiness, where he is taught repentance and the way to heavenly bless. What man is he that boasts of fleshly might and vain assurance of mortality, which all so soon as it doth come to fight against spiritual foes, yields by and by, or from the field most cowardly doth fly? Ne let the man ascribe it to his skill, that through grace hath gained victory. If any strength we have, it is to ill, but all the good is God's, both power and eke will. By that which lately happened, Una saw that this her knight was feeble and too faint, and all his sinews waxen weak and raw, through long imprisonment and hard constraint, which he endured in his late restraint, that yet he was unfit for bloody fight. Therefore to cherish him with diets daint she cast to bring him in, where he cheeren might, till he recovered had his late decayed plight. There was an ancient house not far away, renowned throughout the world for sacred lore, and pure unspotted life. So well they say it governed was, and guided evermore, through wisdom of a matron grave and hoar, whose only joy was to relieve the needs of wretched souls, and help the helpless poor. All night she spent in bidding of her beads, and all the day in doing good and godly deeds. Dame Coelia men did her call, as thought from heaven to come, or thither to rise. The mother of 3 daughters, well upbrought in goodly thews and godly exercise. The eldest 2 most sober, chaste, and wise. Fidelia and Speranza virgins were, though spoused, yet wanting wedlock's solemnize. But fair Charissa to a lovely fere was linkt, and by him had many pledges dear. Arrived there, the door they find fast lockt, for it was warely watched night and day, for fear of many foes. But when they knockt, the porter opened unto them straight away. He was an aged sire, all hoary grey, with looks full lowly cast, and gait full slow, wont on a staffe his feeble steps to stay. Hight humility. They pass in stooping low, for streight and narrow was the way, which he did shew. Each goodly thing is hardest to begin, but entred in a spacious court they see, both plain and pleasant to be walked in, where does them meet a franklin fair and free, and entertaines with comely courteous glee. His name was Zeal, that him right well became, for in his speeches and behaviour he did labour lively to express the same, and gladly did them guide, till to the hall they came. There fairly them receives a gentle squire, of mild demeanour and rare courtesy, right cleanly clad in comely sad attire, in word and deed that shewed great modesty, and knew his good to all of each degree. Hight reverence. He them with speeches meet, does fair entreat, no courting nicety, but simply true, and eke unfeigned sweet, as might become a squire so great persons to greet. And afterwards them to his dame he leads, that aged dame, the lady of the place, who all this while was busy at her beads, which doen she up arose with seemly grace, and towards them full matronly did pace. Where when the fairest Una she beheld, whom well she knew to spring from heavenly race, her heart with joy unwonted inly swelled, as feeling wondrous comfort in her weaker eld. And her embracing said, Happy earth, whereon thy innocent feet do ever tread, most virtuous Virgin born of heavenly birth, that to redeem thy woeful parents head from tyrants rage and ever dying dread, hast wandered through the world now long a day, yet ceasest not thy weary souls to lead. What grace hath thee now hither brought this way, or doen thy feeble feet unweeting hither stray? Strange thing it is an errant knight to see here in this place, or any other wight that hither turns his steps. So few there be that choose the narrow path, or seek the right, All keepe the broad highway, and take delight With many rather for to go aftray, Then be partakers of their evill plight, Then with a few to walke the righteft way. O foolifh men, why haste ye to your owne decay? Thy felfe to fee, and tired limbs to reft, O matron fage, quoth fhe, I hither came, And this good knight this way with me addreft, Led with thy praifes and broad blazed fame, That up to heaven is blowne. The ancient dame him goodly greeted in her modeft guize, And entertained them both as beft became, With all the curtfies that fhe could devize, Ne wanted ought, to ftiew her bounteous or wize. Thus as they gan of sundry things devize, Lo, two moft goodly virgins came in place, Ylinked arme in lovely wize, With countenance demure and modeft grace, They numbred even fteps and equall pace. Of which the eldeft, that Fidelia hight, Like funny beames threw from her chrystall face, That could have dazed the rafh beholders fight, And round about her head did fhine like heavens light. She was arrayd all in lily white, And in her right hand bore a cup of gold, With wine and water filled up to the hight, In which a serpent did himfelfe enfold, That horror made to all, that did behold. But fhe no whit did change her conftant mood, And in her other hand fhe faft did hold A booke, that was both figned and fealed with blood, Wherein darke things were writ, hard to be understood. Her younger fister, that Speranza hight, Was clad in blew, that her befeemed well. Not all fo chearefull feemed fhe of fight, As was her fister, whether dread did dwell, Or anguifh in her heart, is hard to tell. Upon her arme a filver anchor lay, Whereon fhe leaned ever, as befell, And ever up to heaven as fhe did pray, Her ftedfaft eyes were bent, nor fwerved other way. They feeing Una towards her gan wend, Who them encounters with likely courtefie, Many kind fpeaches they between them spend, And greatly joy each other well to fee. Then to the knight with fhamefaft modeftie They turned themfelves at Unas meeke requeft, And him falute with well beseeming glee, Who fare them quite as him befeemed beft, And goodly gan difcourfe of many a noble gueft. Then Una thus: But fhe your fister deare, The deare Charissa, where is fhe become? Or wants fhe health, or busie is elfwhere? Ah no, faid they, but forth fhe may not come, For fhe of late is lightened of her wombe, And hath encreaft the world with one fonne more, That her to fee fhould be but troublesome. Indeed, quoth fhe, that fhould her trouble fore, But thankt be God, and her encreafe fo evermore. Then faid the aged Coelia: Deare dame, and you good Sir, I wot that of your toyle, and labours long, Through which ye hither came, ye both forewearied be, Therefore a while I rede you reft, And to your bowres recoyle. Then called fhe a groome, that forth him led Into a goodly lodge, and gan defpoyle Of puissant armes, and layd in eafie bed. His name was meeke Obedience rightly ared. Now when their weary limbs with kindly reft And bodies were refresht with due repaft, Faire Una gan Fidelia faire requeft, To have her knight into her fchoolhoufe placed, That of her heavenly learning he might tast, And heare the wisdom of her words divine. She graunted, and that knight fo much agraced, That fhe taught him celeftiall difcipline, And opened his dull eyes, that light mote in them fhine. And that her facred booke, with blood ywrit, That none could read, except fhe did them teach, She unto him difclofed every whit, And heavenly documents thereout did preach, That weaker wit of man could never reach, Of God, of grace, of juftice, of free will, That wonder was to heare her goodly fpeach. For fhe was able with her words to kill, And raife again to life the hart, that fhe did thrill. And when fhe lift pour out her larger fpright, She would command the hasty funne to ftay, Or backward turne his courfe from heavens hight. Sometimes great hofts of men fhe could difmay, Dry fhod to pafle fhe parts the floods in tway, And eke huge mountaines from their native feat She would command themfelves to beare away, And throw in raging fea with roaring threat. Almighty God her gave fuch powre and puifance great. The faithfull knight now grew in little fpace, By hearing her, and by her fifters lore, To fuch perfedion of all heavenly grace, That wretched world he gan for to abhorre, And mortall life gan loath as thing forlore, Grieved with remembrance of his wicked wayes, And prickt with anguifh of his finnes fo fore, that he desired to end his wretched days, so much the dart of sinful guilt the soul dismayes. But wise Speranza gave him comfort sweet, and taught him how to take assured hold upon her silver anchor, as was meet. Else had his sinnes so great and manifold made him forget all that Fidelia told. In this distressed doubtful agony, when him his dearest Una did behold, disdaining life, desiring leave to die, she found herself assailed with great perplexity, and came to Coelia to declare her smart, who well acquainted with that commune plight, which sinful horror works in wounded heart, her wisely comforted all that she might, with goodly counsel and advisement right, and straightway sent with careful diligence to fetch a leech, that which had great insight in that disease of grieved conscience, and well could cure the same. His name was Patience. Who coming to that soul diseased knight, could hardly him entreat to tell his griefe, which known, and all that noyed his heavy sprite, well searched, eftsoons he gan apply reliefe of salves and medicines, which had passing priefe, and thereto added works of wondrous might, by which to ease he him recured briefe, and much assuaged the passion of his plight, that he his paine endured, as seeming now more light. But yet the cause and root of all his ill, inward corruption and infected sin, not purged nor healed behind remained still, and festring sore did rankle yet within, close creeping twixt the marrow and the skin, which to extirpe he laid him privily down in a darksome lowly place far in, whereas he meant his corrosives to apply, and with strait diet tame his stubborn malady. In ashes and sackcloth he did array his dainty courfe, proud humours to abate, and dieted with fasting every day, the swelling of his wounds to mitigate, and made him pray both early and eke late, and ever as superfluous flefh did rot, amendment ready still at hand did wait, to pluck it out with pincers fiery hot, that soon in him was left not one corrupted jot. And bitter Penance with an iron whip was wont him once to dispell every day, and sharp remorfe his heart did prick and nip, that drops of blood thence like a well did play, and sad Repentance used to embay his body in salt water smarting fore, the filthy blots of sin to wafh away. So in short fpace they did to health restore the man, that would not live, but erft lay at deaths dore. In which his torment often was so great, that like a lyon he would cry and roare, and rend his flefh, and his own finewes eate. His own deare Una hearing evermore his ruefull shriekes and groanings, often tore her guiltleffe garments and her golden haire, for pity of his paine and anguifh fore. Yet all with patience wifely she did beare, for well she wist his crime could else be never cleare. Whom thus recovered by wise patience and true repentance they to Una brought, who joyous of his cured conscience him dearely kifled, and fairely eke besought himfelfe to cherifh, and confuming thought to put away out of his carefull breast. By this Charissa, late in child bed brought, was woxen ftrong, and left her fruitfull nest, to her faire Una brought this unacquainted guest. She was a woman in her frefheft age, of wondrous beauty and of bounty rare, with goodly grace and comely personage, that was on earth not eafie to compare. Full of great love, but Cupids wanton fnare as hell she hated, chaft in worke and will, her necke and breafts were ever open bare, that aye thereof her babes might fucke their fill, the rest was all in yellow robes arrayed ftill. A multitude of babes about her hung, playing their fports, that joyed her to behold, whom still she fed, whilft they were weake and young, but thruft them forth still, as they wexed old. And on her head fhe wore a tire of gold, adorned with gems and ouches wondrous faire, whofe passing price uneath was to be told. And by her fide there sate a gentle paire of turtle doves, she fitting in an ivory chaire. The knight and Una entring, faire her greet, and bid her joy of that her happy brood, who them requites with curtfies feeming meet, and entertaines with friendly chearefull mood. Then Una her besought to be so good, as in her virtuous rules to fchoole her knight, now after all his torment well withstood, in that sad houfe of Penance, where his fpright had paft the paines of hell and long enduring night. She was right joyous of her juft request, and taking by her hand that Faeries fonne, gan him instruct in every good beheft of love and righteoufneffe and well to done, and wrath and hatred warely to fhunne, that drew on men Gods hatred and his wrath, and many soules in dolours had fordone, in which when him she well instructed hath, from thence to heaven she teacheth him the ready path, wherein his weaker wandring steps to guide. An ancient matron she to her does call, whose sober lookes her wisdom well descried. Her name was Mercy, well known over all, to be both gracious and eke liberall, to whom the carefull charge of him she gave, to lead aright, that he should never fall in all his wayes throughout this wild worlds wave, that Mercy in the end his righteous soule might save. The godly matron by the hand him beares forth from her presence by a narrow way, scattered with bushy thorns and ragged breeres, which still before him she removed away, that nothing might his ready passage stay. And ever, when his feet encumbred were, or gan to shrink, or from the right to stray, she held him fast, and firmely did upbeare, as carefull nurse her child from falling oft does reare. Eftsoons unto a holy hospitall, that was forby the way, she did him bring, in which 7 beadmen, that had vowed all their life to service of high heavens King, did spend their dayes in doing godly thing. Their gates to all were open evermore, that by the weary way were travelling, that one sate waiting ever them before, to call in commers by, that needy were and poore. The first of them, that eldest was and best of all the house, had charge and government, as guardian and steward of the rest. His office was to give entertainment and lodging unto all that came and went, not unto such as could him feast again and double quite, for that he on them spent, but such as want of harbour did constraine, those for Gods sake his duty was to entertaine. The second was as almoner of the place. His office was the hungry for to feed, and thirsty give to drink, a work of grace. He feared not once himself to be in need, ne cared to hoard for those, whom he did breed. The grace of God he laid up still in store, which as a stock he left unto his seed. He had enough, what need him care for more? And had he less, yet some he would give to the poore. The third had of their wardrobe cuftody, in which were not rich tires nor garments gay, the plumes of pride and wings of vanity, but clothes meet to keep keen cold away, and naked nature seemely to array, with which bare wretched wights he daily clad, the images of God in earthly clay. And if that no spare cloths to give he had, his own coat he would cut, and it distribute glad. The fourth appointed by his office was, poor prisoners to relieve with gracious aid, and captives to redeeme with price of brass, from Turks and Sarazins, which them had stayd. And though they faulty were, yet well he weighed, that God to us forgiveth every houre much more than that, why they in bands were layd. And he that harrowed hell with heavy stowre, the faulty soules from thence brought to his heavenly bowre. The fifth had charge sick persons to attend, and comfort those in point of death which lay. For them most needeth comfort in the end, when sin and hell and death do most dismay. The feeble soule departing hence away, all is but lost that living we bestow, if not well ended at our dying day. O man, have mind of that last bitter throe, for as the tree does fall, so lies it ever low. The sixth had charge of them now being dead, in seemly sort their corses to engrave, and deck with dainty flowers their bridal bed, that to their heavenly spouse both sweet and brave they might appeare, when he their soules shall save. The wondrous workmanship of Gods own mould, whose face he made all beafts to feare, and gave all in his hand, even dead we honour should. Our dearest God me grant, I dead be not defouled. The seventh now, after death and burial done, had charge the tender orphans of the dead, and widows aid, least they should be undone. In face of judgment he their right would plead, nor ought the powre of mighty men did dread, in their defence, nor would for gold or fee be won their rightful caufes down to tread. And when they stood in most necessity, he did supply their want, and gave them ever free. There when the elfin knight arrived was, the first and chiefest of the 7, whose care was guefts to welcome, towards him did pass, where seeing Mercy, that his steps upbeare, and alwayes led to her with reverence rare, he humbly louted in meeke lowliness, and seemly welcome for her did prepare. For of their order she was patronesse, albe Charissa were their chiefest founderesse. There she a while him stays himself to rest, that to the rest more able he might be, During which time in every good behest, and godly works of almes and charity, she him instructed with a great induftry. Shortly therein so perfect he became, that from the first unto the last degree, his mortal life he learned had to frame in holy righteoufneffe, without rebuke or blame. Thenceforward by that painfull way they paft forth to an hill, that was both fteep and high, on top whereof a sacred chapel was, and eke a little hermitage thereby, wherein an aged holy man did lie, that day and night said his devotion, nor other worldly bufineffe did apply. His name was heavenly contemplation, of God and goodneffe was his meditation. Great grace that old man to him given had, for God he often faw from heavens hight. All were his earthly eyen both blunt and bad, and through great age had loft their kindly fight. Yet wondrous quick and percent was his fpright, as eagles eye, that can behold the Sunne. That hill they fcale with all their powre and might, that his fraile thighs nigh weary and fordone gan faile, but by her helpe the top at laft he wonne. There they do find that godly aged Syre, with fnowy lockes adowne his fhoulders shed, as hoary froft with spangles doth attire the mossy branches of an oake half dead. Each bone might through his body well be read, and every finew feene through his long faft, for nought he cared his carcaffe long unfed. His mind was full of spiritual repaft, and pined his flefh to keep his body low and chaft. Who when thefe two approaching he efpide, at their firft prefence grew aggrieved fore, that forced him lay his heavenly thoughts afide. And had he not that dame respected more, whom highly he did reverence and adore, he would not once have moved for the knight. They him saluted standing farre afore, who well them greeting humbly did requite, and asked to what end they clombe that tedious hight. What end, quoth fhe, could caufe us take fuch paine, but that fame end, which every living wight Should make his marke high heaven to attaine? Is not from hence the way, that leadeth right To that most glorious houfe, that gliftereth bright With burning starres and everlafting fire? Whereof the keyes are to thy hand behight By wife Fidelia? She doth thee require To shew it to this knight, according his defire. Thrice happy man, faid then the Father grave, Whofe ftaggering fteps thy fteddy hand doth lead, And fhewes the way, his finfull foule to fave. Who better can the way to heaven areed, Then thou thy felfe, who was both born and bred In heavenly throne, where 1000 angels fhine? Thou doeft the prayers of the righteous feed Prefent before the Majesty divine, And his avenging wrath to clemency incline. Yet fince thou bidst thy pleafure fhall be done, Then come thou, man of earth, and fee the way, That never yet was feene of Faeries Sonne, That never leads the traveller aftray, But after labours long and fad delay Bring them to joyous rest and endleffe blifle. But firft thou must a feafon faft and pray, Till from her bands the fprite affoyled is, And have her ftrength recurred from fraile infirmities. That done, he leads him to the higheft mount, Such one as that fame mighty man of God, That blood red billowes like a walled front On either fide departed with his rod, Till that his army dryfoot through them yode. Dwelt 40 dayes uppon, where writ in stone With bloody letters by the hand of God, The bitter doome of death and balefull moane He did receive, while flashing fire about him shone. Or like that sacred hill, whofe head full high, Adorned with fruitfull olives all around, Is, as it were for endleffe memory Of that deare Lord, who oft thereon was found, For ever with a flowring girland cround. Or like that pleasant mount, that is for aye Through famous poets verfe each where renound, On which the thrice 3 learned ladies play Their heavenly notes, and make full many a lovely lay. From thence farre off he unto him did fhew A little path, that was both fteep and long, Which to a goodly city led his vew, Whofe walles and towres were builded high and ftrong Of pearle and precious ftone, that earthly tongue Can not describe, nor wit of man can tell. Too high a ditty for my fimple fong, The city of the great King hight it well, Wherein eternall peace and happineffe doth dwell. As he thereon stood gazing, he might see The bleffed angels to and fro defcend From higheft heaven in gladfome company, And with great joy into that city wend, As commonly as friend does with his friend. Whereat he wondred much, and gan enquire What stately building durft fo high extend Her lofty towres unto the starry fphere, And what unknowen nature there impeopled were. Faire Knight, quoth he, Hierusalem that is, The new Hierusalem, that God has built For thofe to dwell in, that are chofen his. his chosen people, purged from sinful guilt with precious blood, which cruelly was spilt on cursed tree, of that unspotted lamb that for the sins of all the world was kilt. Now are they saints in all that city Sam, more dear unto their God, than younglings to their dam. Till now, said then the knight, I weened well the great Cleopolis where I have been, in which that fairest Faerie Queene doth dwell, the fairest city was, that might be seene, and that bright tower all built of crystal cleene. Panthea seemed the brightest thing that was, but now by proof all otherwise I weene, for this great city that does far surpass, and this bright Angels tower quite dimmes that tower of glass. Most true, then said the holy aged man, yet is Cleopolis for earthly frame the fairest piece that I beholden can, and well beseems all knights of noble name, that covet in the immortal booke of fame to be eternized that same to haunt, and doen their service to that soveraine Dame, that glory does to them for guerdon grant, for she is heavenly borne, and heaven may justly vaunt. And thou, faire imp, sprung out from English race, however now accompted Elfin's son, well worthy does thy service for her grace, to aid a virgin desolate fordone. But when thou famous victory hast won, and high amongst all knights hast hung thy shield, thenceforth the suit of earthly conquest shun, and wash thy hands from guilt of bloody field, for blood can nought but sin, and warres but sorrows yield. Then seek this path, that I to thee presage, which after all to heaven shall thee send. Then peaceably thy painfull pilgrimage to yonder same Hierusalem do bend, where is for thee ordained a blessed end. For thou amongst the saints whom thou dost see shalt be a saint, and thine own nations friend and patron, thou Saint George shalt called be, Saint George of merry England, the signe of victory. Unworthy wretch, quoth he, of so great grace, how dare I think such glory to attaine? These that have it attained were in like case, quoth he, as wretched, and lived in like paine. But deeds of armes must I at last be faine, and ladies love to leave so dearly bought? What need of armes, where peace doth aye remaine, said he, and battailes none are to be fought? As for loose loves they are vaine, and vanish into nought. O let me not, quoth he, then turne again back to the world, whose joyes so fruitless are, but let me here for aye in peace remaine, or straightway to that last long voyage fare, that nothing may my present hope impaire. That may not be, said he, nor mayst thou yet forgo that royal maids bequeathed care, who did her cause into thy hand commit, till from her cursed foe thou have her freely quit. Then shall I soon, quoth he, so God me grace, abet that virgins cause disconsolate, and shortly back returne unto this place, to walk this way in pilgrims poore estate. But now aread, old father, why of late did thou behight me born of English blood, whom all a Faerie's son do nominate? That word shall I, said he, avouchen good, sith to thee is unknown the cradle of thy brood. For well I wot, thou spring'st from ancient race of Saxon kings, that have with mighty hand and many bloody battles fought in place, high reared their royal throne in Britain land, and vanquished them, unable to withstand. From thence a Faerie thee unwitting reft, there as thou slepst in tender swaddling band, and her bafe elfin brood there for thee left, such men do changelings call, so changed by Faeries theft. Thence she thee brought into this Faerie land, and in an heaped furrow did thee hide, where thee a ploughman all unweeting fond, as he his toilsome team that way did guide, and brought thee up in ploughman's ftate to bide. Whereof Georgus he thee gave to name, till pricked with courage and thy forces pride, to Faerie court thou cam'st to seek for fame, and prove thy puissant armes, as seemes thee best became. O holy Sire, quoth he, how shall I quite the many favours I with thee have found, that hast my name and nation read aright, and taught the way that does to heaven bound? This said, adown he looked to the ground, to have returned, but dazed were his eyne through passing brightness, which did quite confound his feeble sense, and too exceeding shine, so dark are earthly things compared to things divine. At last, when as himself he gan to find, to Una back he cast him to retire, who him awaited still with pensive mind. Great thanks and goodly meed to that good Sire he hence departing gave for his paines hire. So came to Una, who him joyed to see, And after little reft gan him defire Of her adventure mindfull for to be. So leave they take of Crelia, and her daughters three. Canto X. The Legend of the Knight of Red Cross.